Hermes Trismegistus, the unknown treatise Hermetica Oxoniensia for the soul and the fetus. This is by Hermes Trismegistus, or Thoth the Atlantean, and the end of it saying, just as thought is produced by the mind, so divine energy, divinity, is produced by God, the divine spirit. Hermes Trismegistus and the unknown treatise Hermetica Oxoniensia for the soul and the fetus. In a code of the 13th or 14th century AD, an unknown Hermetic treatise, usually entitled Hermetica Oxoniensia, was discovered after Oxford, where the manuscript is located. This treatise, which unfortunately is not preserved in its entirety, occupies pages 82 and 83 of the Codex Clarkianus 11. The edition princeps is by Joseph Paramel and Jean-Pierre Mahet. Extraits Hermetic Inedits Dan un Manuscript Oxford. Okay. And the text they provide is at the end of the post. The text shows a spiritual affinity with Hermetic excerpts saved by Stovius, and especially excerpts 8 and 15 to 20. These excerpts from Stovius are addressed to Ammon, but it's certain that the treatise in the Oxford manuscript was a different text. Our treatise also presents a philosophical affinity with the medical school of the spiritual, and especially with the work Medical Terms, which is delivered under the name of Gilanus. Now, indeed, most of the passages in the text, with the exception of paragraph 3, which concerns the laws, deal with the function of the soul and the senses, as well as with the formation and animation of the fetus. Paragraph 3, however, connects human law with the evil tendencies of the human soul, which should normally obey reason. According to our text, the soul has a logical part that consists of logic itself, that is reason, and a mental part, that is the mind, which is related to the mental essence. In addition, there's a part of the soul without logic, that is the horse part of the soul, which includes the power of anger and desire. Normally, these two irrational elements must be subdued by the power of logic, reasoning, which occupies an intermediate position between reason and intellect and mind, although it follows above all the latter. And when the power of reason comes in contact with the horse part of the soul, it must rationalize its impulses and fill it with prudence in order to neutralize it. In the opposite case, when the horse part dominates over the logical, then comes the contempt, the audacity, the domination of pleasure, causing all kinds of suffering and leading to disrespect. The human law that is supposed to try to correct these errors cannot ultimately succeed because it's based on opinion and belief. Glory is deprived of true justice, which dwells in heaven. The second paragraph of our treatise is devoted to the function of the senses, which are connected with the four elements. The vision of the eyes, which is analogous to fire, plays an important role in reviving the passions and especially the desire, since the latter relies heavily on vision. One must set aside bodily vision in order to gain the view of the truly good and beautiful. The fifth and last paragraph of the text deals with the fetus. The sperm forms in the brain as a foam that floats in the surface during intercourse and is injected inside the uterus. Part of the sperm is worn out, is filtered, removed with the help of nature, and the rest created through the power of breath, spiritual powers, acquires size, length, form, shape, endowed with a visible face, an idol, which can make its appearance a spectrum. The mental element that guides this whole process is an invisible imagery form, and in any case precedes any physical manifestation. Between this invisible imagery form and the visible face mediates the bodily idea, a type which is the means by which the invisible form shapes the body. It makes it visible so that it finally gets size and space. The body obeys the harmony of numbers. The animation of the fetus, unlike some other Hermetic treatises, takes place before birth, since the fetus lives and breathes in its mother's womb, and the available text closes with a formula that recalls the primordial creation of the world and all things, a common theme in Hermetic tradition. Paragraph 1. That is why the soul is incorporeal, ugly without parts and contrary to the properties of the body, that is, the shape and color, as well as different from the variety that characterizes the bodies, is always in the same state and unchanged, maintains its immortality as one, because it belongs to itself. So, since it does not need something else in order to be maintained, it does not participate in movement and birth, because beings like the soul have no birth, and what is not born does not increase, what does not increase does not decrease, what does not decrease does not wear out, what does not wear out does not change, what does not change is permanent, while the permanent is not affected from the change and fluidity of the body. The property is self-propelled by nature. The motorhome is immortal and mental because of the mind. This, then, is the power of conceivable substance. Paragraph 2. The eye has the power of sight, while the tongue has the power of taste. Each of these forces is proportional to the four elements. Sight corresponds to fire, hearing to air, smell to water, and taste to earth. Paragraph 3. Because the people, based on their beliefs, set the law as the guardian of those who judge, abandoning the true justice in the soul that exists with its body in eternity. So they blame each other and hate each other instead of loving each other, have become misanthropes instead of philanthropists, full of ignorance instead of knowledge. Because of this ignorance, they attract to themselves misfortune and fatality, the commandment of ignorance, without knowing the truth, full of cunning. That is why the sky is clear of such laws. Paragraph 4. When the power of anger is detached from the power of reason, it breeds audacity. Audacity is a multifaceted evil, which is why hatred is so great in wicked people. When desire is again detached from the power of reason, it gives birth to pleasure and all kinds of misfortunes. Find it in its madness, destroying human life completely. Pleasure based on vision gives birth to a rage with the help of vision, reheating the tendency to indulge and adding to this tendency the illogic erotic intercourse. He also invents terrible words, audacity beyond the law, excessive disrespect, and gives birth to all kinds of sufferings. Because between the mind and reason meditates the power of logic, reasoning, which follows the mind. So when the horse is detached from the power of reasoning, it gives birth to ignorance and audacity. The shape of the body is a manifestation and visible aspect of the ideal form species that creates the bodies. This ideal form is a model type of shape. It works and creates through the following processes. The human sperm accumulates in the brain with the result it floats there like foam, having in it a genital force, and this, when he wishes to have intercourse, forcibly ejects the so-called sperm into the uterus. Nature receives the sperm, changes it, and separates what is purulent and worn, and what is left over forms it with the help of the force of the breath that exists within it and makes it gain size. Gaining size changes into an image. It then gives its shape to form in order to reveal the visible face of the body. And as soon as it becomes visible, an idol, it appears as a body. The body takes shape in the womb. It shapes like a living creature and breathes into the abdomen. Its harmony derives from the numbers, while the shapes function as a kind of space for the ideal shapes of the bodies. Because when the shape welcomes the ideal form, immediately the shape is assimilated with the ideal form, and in this way the shape becomes analogous to the ideal form of the shape, while at the same time it's the model type of the body. The imaginary form is earlier than the pattern, while the body acquires a shape thanks to the pattern, resulting in a visible form that can be seen. Because birth differs from birth, as well as born from born, is shaped like a living creature and breathing into the abdomen. Its harmony derives from the numbers, while the shape functions as a kind of space for the ideal shapes of the bodies. Because when the shape welcomes the ideal form, immediately the shape is assimilated with the ideal form, and in this way the shape becomes analogous to the ideal form of the shape, while at the same time it is the model type of the body. The imaginary form is earlier than the pattern, while the body acquires a shape thanks to the pattern, resulting in the visible form that can be seen. Because birth differs from birth as well as born from born, is shaped like a living creature and breathes into the abdomen. The harmony derives from numbers, while the shapes function as a kind of space for the ideal shapes of the bodies. The imagery form is earlier in the pattern, while the body acquires a shape thanks to the pattern, resulting in the visible form can be seen. Now, the principle of the primordial creation of the world is as follows. It is the birth of everything. As much as the mind differs from thought, so does divinity differ from divinity, because what is divine was deified by God. Now, the notes. According to the passage Stove 8, the first kind of incorporeal beings belong to the category of the conceivable and does not have color, shape, and body. However, there is the intellect and not the soul, as here. And the passage of Stove, we read that the mental essence, being close to God, possesses the free will to dominate itself without being subject to necessity. Third note, the soul is immovable in the sense that it cannot be forced and is not subject to the motion and decay to which physical bodies are subject. However, it has its own movement, and as we read in passages of Stove 3:1-3, every soul is immortal and always in motion. 4. The body of the immortal soul is the spirit. 5. For the audacity as a motif of the fall of the soul, we see passages of Stove. On the contrary, when anger is driven by reason, then it turns into courage. Excerpt from Stove 17:2. The discussion here is somewhat reminiscent of the Aristotelian way of describing virtues and vices. 6. The verb used in the original form is domination of logic over irrational, is anakipto, I raise my head. Very characteristically, the Hermetic Treatise Pomandris, the fall of the primitive man, is due to the fact that he looked down to look through the cosmic fears at the irrational animals. And according to Hermetic Text 7.3 and Asclepius 12, through pleasure the soul makes man cling to that part of him which is mortal, while the body, deprived of logic, pulls the soul towards itself downwards. 7. In Hermetic passage 22 we read that when nutrient blood is turned into foam, then the genitals will produce sperm. We can compare this foam that floats on the surface of the brain with the crust that floats on the surface of the mixture that God made to create souls in the Hermetic passage 23:18. The theory of sperm as foam was attributed to Pythagoras, while we find it again in Aristotle. 8. The pronoun refers to a term which was in the worn part of the text between the crosses. 9. The extremely complex phraseology of the text conceals the following concept of the process of creation of the human body. In the first stage, there is the imaginary form of the body, for example, of the human. This imaginary form is called, in the original species, which is a Platonic term. Based on this imagery form, an intermediate abstract pattern shape is created, which is called a formula. It's then adapted to its type as if its model were the visible form of the body, which is called an idol, literally meaning reflection, realization of the species and the ideal form. This whole process takes place in the womb. What is formed is the sperm with a worker nature and with use of breath in order for the body to take shape. And 10, just as thought is produced by the mind, so divine energy, divinity, is produced by God, divinity. And this I've translated for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.